Hi, I'm Chris McLean from Stonechair Capital. Earlier, I had the opportunity to sit down with Oluwole Eweje of Watt Renewables and hear how the power of diaspora is changing the telecoms industry in Nigeria. Let's dive into that discussion with Oluwole of Watt Renewables and learn more about energy and Africa. Hello. Thanks for joining me today, and I have a great discussion that I'm very much looking forward to. It's with a gentleman I've known for some time now, Oluwole Eweje, and he joins me here in Calgary at the studio, which is a fabulous opportunity. Oluwole is normally back and forth from Nigeria, and it's quite a pleasure to have him here in studio today. And so, Oluwole, I'd like to give the floor to you a little bit and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Chris. It's actually good to join this discussion. I know we've talked about this, and it's good to actually be here having this discussion with you. About myself, it's I never really know where to start with that particular question, but I guess I can try to go a little way back to when I was in junior high. It's a long ways back, but junior high, I remember I went to a boarding school. And in boarding school over the weekends, you got lots of time. In the evenings, you've got lots of time. And especially at night, you have a ton of time because there's let me say about 80% of the time, there's no power. So you're spending time outside with your colleagues, with the other students, just kind of catching up on what's happened, what your dreams are, what you want to do when you finally get home, what you want to do when you grow up. And I remember one particular weekend I was in a conversation on the field with a friend of mine, and we were talking about, wouldn't it be great if we could solve part of this problem where we don't have power at night? We all go to bed all sweaty in the middle of the night. You can't sleep well because it's hot. You know, you leave the windows open, you get bitten by mosquitoes, you get malaria, all that kind of stuff. And I mean, fast forward many decades later, that desire actually really never left. It always played somewhere at the back of my mind. And I know we'll get to the discussion in and around what we currently do, but I think that discussion really was a very pivotal discussion very early on for me, because it kind of shaped a lot of the ways that I looked at social services in Nigeria. My name is Oluwole Eweje. Thank you for the intro. I am, yes, Nigerian. I've lived in Canada now for almost 20 years, on and off. I grew up in, I would say, a lower middle class family, and got the great opportunity to come to such a wonderful country to actually go to school. I've got a background in engineering and business. I've worked in a lot of the international engineering firms, some management consulting firms, worked with some banks locally and internationally. And right now, we are leading what we would call the renewable energy revolution in Africa. We are looking at ways with which we can close that gap in that massive power vacuum that there is, energy vacuum, I should say, that there is in Africa. And I'm sure you'd have a lot more questions. We can do a deep dive into my upbringing.
No, that's great. You had an important thing that I was going to get to here, was to say, you've worked in industry that wasn't energy in Africa. And there was that motivation at your core being that took you back to, there's a problem that I know I have the skills to solve.
That's right.
So tell me about the journey that you have been on with Watt and the things that you've done here in Canada and how that drew you eventually to Nigeria.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Maybe I'll start off with the journey, and I would kind of just talk about the journey that kind of led up to the company.
Sure.
Watt.
Yeah.
When I came to Canada, there were certain problems that I thought that I could solve or be a part of the solution when I go back to Nigeria. I'd always known I was going to go back. There were certain issues that I had identified as a young adult before I left. Power was one of them. Agriculture was another one. Housing or real estate was another one. The ability to move people around, transportation, were 4 key items that I thought, you know what, massive opportunity. You go into a developed country, they've figured out the solution to all of these problems. All you really got to do is don't reinvent the wheels. Just look at what they've done, and see how you can take some of those learnings and bring it back. Now, very naive, very early on, I thought it was going to be as simple as you go to school, you graduate, you get all these learnings, maybe 1 or 2 years of work experience, and boom, you go back and you solve all these problems. But it never ended up working that way. From graduating, I figured I needed to learn something. So I worked with the government of BC for a while.
Okay.
I worked in energy and mines. I worked in the Ministry of Forest for a while, and kind of felt it just wasn't enough. I wanted to learn more, so I took the big step from very beautiful British Columbia, and I took the step and went to extremely cold Fort McMurray, Alberta. I mean, I'm assuming you've been to Fort Mac.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, the story of Fort Mac is a different one, but we can get to that later. But in Fort Mac, I was learning the oil sands, and I was also learning how to project manage, how to manage people, how to solve real complex problems. Now, people might say the technology is out there, but the oil sands is still, well, back then was still solving complex issues, how to actually get this oil out and effectively and at a certain cost range. And I took a lot of those learnings and kind of developed my own skill set in leadership. And that's really what I got out of that. But I always felt that I still had not gotten to any of the 4 central key points that I was trying to find a solution to. Eventually, I ended up working with this management consulting firm, engineering management consulting firm. And it was at that point that I actually started identifying solutions to some of these key problems. And I remember just as the recession was gradually about to start in Canada in 2015, 2016,
Yep.
I was having drinks with some of my friends one night, and I said, I've really been thinking about this thing for a long time. We've got a massive energy power issue in Africa. And we had just finished working on a power project for this engineering management firm that I was working for. And I said, I strongly believe that all of us at this table do have the skill set to solve the problem. We kind of chatted about it. We didn't really go in any one particular way on what the real solution was, but we talked about the problem in a lot more detail.
Mm-hmm.
And as we kept looking, we realized that the NDP had just won governance in Alberta, and they were really big on renewable energy. And we started looking at what policies they had and how we could actually get in there. We started working with some indigenous communities.
Oh, okay.
In Alberta, in trying to help them with that transition from conventional power supply and diesel dependency to renewable, because the NDP government was really supportive of that. And as we were doing that consultation, we were doing that engineering, we started saying to ourselves, hold on, this might be part of the solution. And we looked at the African or well, I guess you could say the African and the Nigerian problem, and looked at the solutions we were preferring in Canada and said, you know what, we can take this exact same solution to Nigeria and it would work perfectly. So that's where the whole idea of going to Nigeria started. Now, the whole idea of Canada in itself actually started from that first conversation we had, just all sitting around having drinks, and identifying how to solve it. Now, there's another interesting story in and around how the name came about, but we'll tell you about that one. Tell you about that in a minute.
Fair enough. The powerful, powerful thing that has resonance when I talk to you is the irrefutable force that diaspora have. That change is driven by inside out.
Correct.
And you are a prime example of the focus that has been since your early formative years, as it were, to here you are today with a business in Canada and Nigeria that's affecting change where you see it most needed.
Yeah.
The place where you and I connected, first sort of came across each other was at the Africa Investment Forum in 2019.
That's correct.
And you were there because you had won a business plan competition. Talk me through that.
Yeah, that was the Private Financing Advisory Network, PFAN. I believe the PFAN is sponsored by UNIDO. And they do this competition. They gather the best energy projects in different parts of Africa. And we initially all go through an initial advisory process. Okay. And then from that advisory process, they pick the top 10 or the top 15 projects, and they all come together for a pitch competition. And you get to pitch your project to investors. Now, my PFAN folks will probably hear this, but I'm going to tell this little story about PFAN.
Sure, yeah.
PFAN had a competition in Vancouver. I'd heard about them. We'd applied. We didn't get in the first time. We'd applied a second time. We'd gotten in because it's quite an exclusive program to get in. We finally got into the program. And when we got into the program, we were told at the end of it, the whole goal is to get financing for your project. But one of the best ways to get to a lot of investors is to be able to get into this pitch competition eventually.
Yep.
That's really where the crop de la creme of all the projects that they have actually all come together, and then they pitch to investors from all over the place.
A global Shark Tank.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. Just kind of like the Shark Tank. Yeah. So I went to Vancouver. I left Calgary, flew down to Vancouver to go watch one of this Shark Tank type competition that they had going on. And I was like, oh, wow, look at all these investors. Wow, I would really love to make it to this point. And we spent about 7 months with an advisor. Shout out to Monica Semek. And we already had some of these documents already, but she really helped us own into it, perfect it. And we got it out there. Finally, PFAN looked at it. They thought we had a really good project. And I think we're maybe one of the last projects to be selected into that competition, if not the last project to be selected into that competition. And, there's something to be said about the fact that that you just kind of just got in there just barely, but there's always that conviction that I strongly believe that we've got a very well developed project. We'll talk about the project. We've got a very well developed project. We've got a really good organization, and we've got extremely great processes. Outside of all of that, we're solving a real need for lots of people, which we're also going to talk about. But yes, we got into the competition, and as we were prepping for it, we took it seriously. Like, we knew that we barely got in. We didn't understand why, but we barely got in, and we took it very seriously. And at the end of the 1 week event, we came in first. We actually won the competition. And just by virtue of winning that competition, we also got invited to the African Investment Forum, which is where you were as an investor. And we got into the African Investment Forum to actually do the same pitch to a much wider investor audience at the AIF. And but there's one thing I should also mention, that PFAN did help, but so did another organization called Get Invest. And there were two individuals within Get Invest, Ad Danker and Michael Feldner, that I would say in this space that we are in really groomed us, and they groomed me at least, to the point where we had a really good business plan. We had really good processes. We had all investor type ready documentation that any investor would require, and allowed us to also look at, in a very critical sense, the risk associated with the project that we are doing. So it wasn't just PFAN that really kind of got us there. It was PFAN helped get us to that pitch competition and to AIF. Get Invest really helped us get ready for all of these conversations that we've been having ever since.
For our listeners, we'll make sure that the contact details for these different organizations are in the show notes, because it's an important part of your path, and others would definitely, I think, benefit from that as well.
Absolutely. I would recommend Get Invest anytime to anyone. I would recommend PFAN as well to anyone.
So let's jump ahead to where you are today. You've got a tiger by the tail, as it were. You've got a big giant project. You've got big giant goals. Tell us about it.
I'll start off with the big giant project.
Sure.
That we've got. There are three, in my own opinion. I would say maybe about four big energy polluters in Nigeria. I'm just using Nigeria now in this particular case. It probably applies to other parts of Africa as well. Residential consumer that always run generators all the time is one. Vehicles on the road, especially in a place like Nigeria that is always. You've been to Nigeria.
Oh yeah, many times. Yeah.
And so you've been to Lagos. You know what it's like. Massive pollution from all the vehicles that are on the road. Government, just from the scale of operations that the government and influence the government has in the entire country, and the amount of energy that they use. And another massive energy polluter that we don't typically talk about a lot are telecom companies. Because of the reliability that is required to keep everybody connected, you need your cell phone towers to be constantly powered. In a lot of African countries, the electrification rate is really low. In Nigeria, I think it might be maybe about 45-47% electrification rate. The generation rate is also very, very low compared to the energy needs. In Nigeria, I think we've got a generating capacity of maybe about 12 to 15 megawatt. Gigawatt.
Yep.
Yeah. But we are only generating five. Yep. I would say about 5 to 6.
Yep.
So, but the country in itself needs a lot more than that. I mean, the country in itself is probably needs anywhere from maybe like 20, if not more. I mean, we've got a country of about say 180 million, 200 million people. If each person, or if let's say each person uses say 1 kilowatt, that's about what 200 gigawatt of power that is required. We're not even anywhere close to what the people actually need. So what do this this telecoms company do? They still need to make sure that their cell towers are up. To ensure the reliability, they run generators. Now, what maybe a lot of people do not understand or maybe do not know is if a cell tower is down, you're not able to make calls. You get dropped calls. You're not able to surf the internet. You're not able to send text messages. You're essentially like cut off from the world. Now, in Africa, what most people do is because of that constant drop calls and all those issues, they have multiple cell phones and they have multiple service providers. Very ineffective. In Canada, we have one because it's reliable, right? Yep. In Nigeria, they have multiple because when one goes down, because the generator has stopped working, then they can switch to the other one to be able to make a call or to be able to surf the internet. Now, the solution, not the only one, but the solution that these telecom providers had come up with was to have multiple generators running at any time. So they have a generator running, then they've got a generator on standby. So if one was to fail, the other one would kick in. And because of that, they're running their generator 24/7, 365 days a year. In some cases, they've been running it like that for 20 years. And in some cases, they've got thousands of sites where that's what they do. I think in Nigeria right now, we have about 17,000, over 20,000 cell phone sites that are all running on generators. So now we came in and we said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And that better way is what we refer to as a solar hybrid solution.
Okay.
So we've got solar energy storage with a generator as backup. The most of these sites now run on solar and battery. Rather than running your generator 24 hours, you might run them 0 hours, or at times you might run them 4 hours in a day. So that's what we are doing. That's a big giant project. But there's another component to that project, which is in and around a lot of the cell phone towers are service providers. Most of them try to congregate around the cell phone towers because they know that those cell phone towers would always stay up in terms of power all the time.
Right.
So they try to get power from those stations to be able to provide services to their community. It could be cell phone charging services, which is what we see a lot of. It could be kids' video game services where kids can come and play video games. It could be a TV service where people can come and watch football, wrestling, boxing, whatever the community wants to come and watch. They all tend to congregate in and around wherever there is a cell phone station. So what we've now started looking at that we're doing as well is not just powering those cell phone towers, but also providing power to the small and medium scale businesses that are in and around the cell phone towers in a more renewable or clean, providing them with clean energy, more cost effective way, providing that reliability that they need to operate their business.
And so how long have you guys been operating with this business model in Nigeria now then for?
Well, we started in 2018.
Okay. Yep.
So we've been doing it since 2018 in Nigeria. I mean, before we even did that, we initially started off with doing mini grids. So we had built a mini grid in a community It's still operational, powering houses, schools, or not hospitals, clinics within the community. And now we're now in this CNI space where we're providing energy as a service to telecommunication providers and using them as an anchor to provide power to small and medium scale businesses in and around the cell phone towers.
You hit on an interesting phrase that I had heard before, that idea of energy as a service. It's not energy as an asset, energy as a right, it's energy as a service.
Yeah.
So in your business models, the way you're looking at things with your anchor tenant, are they the one that you end up having a corporate power purchase agreement with, and that, or do you extend your model to have energy as service fees also from your additional add-ons that go with it? How do you look at sort of that expansion for your company going forward?
Right now, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The anchor tenant provides us with, I would say, 90% of our revenue base.
Mm-hmm.
The small and medium scale businesses in and around those anchor tenants also do pay us, but the revenue from them is really small. They're small businesses.
Yeah.
So our goal further down the line is to be able to build community power plants where we are providing power to communities, but at the same time where you've got this anchor tenants that can come in and say, as part of our social responsibility to this community, we will subsidize some of their power tariff, which is what the anchors are doing right now. So that's that model that we're using right now is on a smaller scale.
Mm-hmm.
The plan is to actually grow it to a more bigger power plant per community further down the line.
So an interesting ramification, or maybe not ramification, realization of the actualities here is that your business plan is not anticipating that growth of the domestic grid, whether they be through the government's growth or from the privatized approach, to say a grid expansion is going to continue in your country. You still see a need for decentralized power.
Yeah, absolutely. We looked at the UK model. In the UK, just prior to the Industrial Revolution, prior to where they actually had massive power supplies, people were really taking care of business themselves. They were taking care of themselves. And it's the same thing that we're looking at. We're saying, even if the grid became reliable today, mm-hmm. we don't see that happening for a little while. But if the grid became reliable today, people still need a level of backup and reliability. Take Alberta. We've got the oil sands. We've got cogeneration plants from the oil sands. Power has been generated there. Power has been generated through hydro. Power has been generated through solar. People are looking at generating power through wind. Ancillary services to provide backup to the existing power grid. The government is still providing that. And how many people do we have in Alberta? We've got
4 million.
4 million people.
Yeah.
So 4 million people, and we've got backup on backups to ensure that the power grid does not fail and to ensure that power is always available. If the grid in Nigeria was to become reliable tomorrow, people would still demand a backup. And before that grid becomes reliable, we're already providing what could be classified as that backup, decentralized power. And who knows, we might be so effective that the communities might say, you know what, the grid becomes the backup to our existing decentralized power station, which they would already be used to by that time. So
it creates the interesting possibility of consumers versus prosumers.
That's right.
Who's producing power for the grid?
That is and I see, and we've had a few discussions where the GenCos, as they are called in Nigeria, and even the discos, the distribution companies, are now looking at distributed power providers and saying, you know what, are you able to provide a standalone power generation facility for community A, and we will seed that area to you. So you own that area. You just pay us for whatever we provide from the grid. The government has really encouraged that with government policies. So I think the DISCOs, the GENCOs, the government are realizing that there's a need for more energy mix, energy generation mix into in Nigeria at least.
So an interesting thing that you have created here with your company and your ambitions going forward is you're creating jobs at the same time. And your jobs aren't created in one jurisdiction. Talk to me about the international nature of your business and how it continues to evolve.
Yeah, you're right. That's what government's always looking for, right? Jobs, companies that are creating jobs. That's why they continue to promote and support businesses like ours. So in Canada, we do have we've got some staff here in Canada. So working on Canadian operations. In Nigeria, we've got a fairly large organization in Nigeria. I mean, we started in 2018. This is 2021, and the organization has grown right now to almost 40 people that are full-time employees that we've got. And we're now looking at not just Nigeria, we're looking at other African countries. We're actually looking at other continents as well. We've been in discussions, doing proposals, and surveying projects in different continents also. So as our operations continues to grow, obviously the human resource that is required as well continues to grow. We're projecting to be at about over 70 employees before the end of this year. And next year we're hoping that when everything goes according to plan, we'll be doubling those numbers as well. So yes, you're right. And when I say doubling the numbers, I mean combined between Canada and Africa in this case.
Now, you made another comment here too that I'd like to go back to. It's when everything goes back to normal. That's an interesting statement, normal, in our real world. I know, though, that you, being the driven individual you are, don't sit still. You've been back and forth a couple times. Tell me about doing business during COVID and traveling back and forth to the continent.
Oh, that's a very interesting dynamic. I think Alberta is on its third shutdown. I think in Nigeria, when COVID hit, I was actually in South Africa. Actually, and that was March of 2020.
Yeah,
I can't think what year this is. March of 2020, and I remember the investors I was talking to back then saying, you know what, this country is gonna shut down, and I didn't quite take it seriously. Luckily enough, I kind of got out before, and just as I got out, they shut down, and I left Nigeria, came back to Canada, and then everything shut down. Nigeria shut down. The old world essentially shut down. Now, Nigeria did eventually reopen, but by the time they reopened, the case count at that time, for whatever reason, was low, and things kind of went back to semi-normal for them. People were going back. Some people were going back to work. We were not working. All our staff were working from home. And in Canada, obviously, we were still shut down, so we were all working from home. And we actually are still working from home at this particular time. In Nigeria, we gradually did a modified work schedule but now we're actually fully all back in the office as of now in Nigeria. But traveling has gotten a lot more interesting. Before you leave, different countries with different rules.
Sure. Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
And to get to Africa, you've got to either go through the US, you've got to go through Europe, and in some cases, you go through Ethiopia, which is a much longer
with Ethiopian Air. Yeah,
that's right. And going through Europe, I remember in August of last year when I was trying to get back to Nigeria, I got stuck in London for a week.
Jumping.
I mean, we had a flight. We got to the airport. We were allowed to fly from Calgary to London to Heathrow. And we get to Heathrow and they're like, what are you doing here? There's no flight to Nigeria. I was like, what do you mean there's no flight? I got a ticket over here. And they're like, oh, well, there's no flight. And I'm like, okay, so what's the plan? They're like, oh, well, you stay in London or we put you on a flight back to Canada. So, but now to get to Nigeria is actually even a little more tricky because we're trying to go through Germany. You've got to have a COVID test 48 hours prior to departure.
Yep.
To get to Nigeria, you've got to have a COVID test. I think their COVID test might also be like 48 hours. So you've got to try to figure out, okay, I get to Germany at X time. I got to get on my flight at this time. Am I still within my 48-hour time period? And at times when you're not within your 48-hour time period, you got to do 2 tests. You've got to do an antigen test that would satisfy the German authorities, and we're still within the time period. And you've got to do a COVID test that would satisfy the Nigerian authorities so that you could still be within the time period. So typically what we do is we'll do a COVID test that will satisfy the Nigerian authority for the 48-hour time period. You do a COVID test at the airport that will satisfy the German authorities so that you can still be within the 48-hour period. Because if you don't do that, you miss your flight.
But you've done this a few times.
Oh yeah.
And your energy as a service, I'm only supposing here, but has escalated in demand because COVID has created more demand of the telcos.
Absolutely.
You got COP26 coming up. You want all kinds of things to happen, and you are all of a sudden a valuable asset.
Absolutely. Energy as a service for telecoms has never even been so important until during COVID. Telecom operators, I would say, made a lot of money during COVID. And we all know why. Everyone is at home. There's not a lot of places to go to. The only way you connect to friends and family is through your phone. So telecom operators really needed to ensure that all of their sites were up and running during COVID. They had all the backups that they required to help ensure that the sites were not down. Because when a site is down, there's a dollar component to it. If a site is down for over an hour, a telecom operator could be losing millions of naira because now people aren't making calls. They're not surfing the internet. They're not on Instagram. They're not on Facebook. No FaceTime. And telecom operators, they want everybody on their platform all the time. So coming out of COVID slowly has really reinforced to them the need to ensure that there's a more reliable power source, and if possible, multiple sources to ensure that they stay up all the time.
So it poses an interesting question. Telcos being in Nigeria, in Africa in general, being one of the powerhouse industries that's allowed the expansion of so many items in the development of knowledge, of businesses. It's driven around the telco. With the strength that they have, why do they not want to be in energy? Why do they want to call Wole?
Telecoms companies have realized that power is not their business. their core business is technology. Looking at how do we transition from 3G to 4G to 5G. How do we get this latest and greatest small cell technology out to market? How do we capture a much larger market share? And if you really look at where they are now, let's talk about where they started from.
Sure. Yeah.
So in 1999 was when telecommunications was privatized in Nigeria. And we had all this, we had MTN, we had Econet, a few other providers that came in. Back then, what these guys were doing was they owned the entire value chain, right? They owned the technology aspect of it. They were dealing with the power aspect of it. They were dealing with the government and licensing aspect of it. And as time went on, they realized that there were just certain aspects they were not good at. They gradually realized that their business was actually no longer telecoms. They were essentially graduating to becoming a power company because they were putting a lot of resources on trying to solve the power problem.
Yep.
And I think some of the very smart people in the room kind of sat back and said, you know what?
Not our business.
Not our business. Yeah. We got to give this to people that could do it more effectively. So they initially outsourced it to tower companies. And tower companies also realized our business is trying to actually grow this tower business, which is trying to find more lucrative spots for MTN, for Airtel, for 9Mobile, so that they can put their cell phone equipment in there. Our business is not trying to figure out how we keep the sites up and running all the time. That's where people like us come in.
Interesting, yep.
So we now come in with technology because, I mean, solar hybrid systems are not proprietary, really.
Yep.
But what is more proprietary is the process and the engineering that you use in ensuring reliability. Now, anybody can say, oh, it's easy, I can do it. Sure, lots of people have tried. And some have left, and in other parts of the world, some are still doing quite well. So when they look at the engineering proprietariness that we bring, when they look at the processes that we bring, when they look at the quality of equipment that we bring, the customer service that we bring, it's really a no-brainer for them. And you cap it all with a very cost-effective pricing model that allows them to pay for power the same way power is paid for in North America. They're very excited about it.
Therein, I think, is something quite innovative for power generation and usage that the continent as a whole is trying to get away from the, PPAs that have take or pay and all, it's to, no, whatever I use, I pay for.
That's right. That's
it's bankrupted how many different utilities across the continent. It's how many different governments are still dealing with legacy PPAs that are, you need the investment 20 years ago to say, I want to do something, but they're paying for power at 25, 30 cents a kilowatt versus 5 to 10.
That's correct.
It's bankrupting people. And you come along and say, I can do this for corporates that have stronger balance sheets than governments, have better credit ratings, are the cash flow generating kings of the continent, and you're my client. And sure, we'll do take or pay.
That's right. No, you
not take or pay. We'll do pay as you go.
Pay as you go.
Yep.
Yeah. No, you nailed it. And that's, obviously, telecom operators are key in a lot of African countries because they're providing a lot. They're putting a lot back into the GDP of a lot of these countries. They got strong balance sheets. They are strong organizations that are investor ready as well. And that typical concern around would they pay is not always there because the operator knows if I don't pay and I get shut down, I'm actually losing more in revenue than if I just pay these guys whatever I've used and keep everybody happy. And that's what we've seen. we've seen these operators gladly pay because they get the service. Their end customers, which is typically someone like me,
Yeah.
is very happy. So I stay with them and I buy more recharge cards because they are quote unquote reliable. Yeah.
You go from 3 phones to 1, and you're spending all your airtime with them. That's a happy customer. Huh?
Exactly.
Very interesting. Very interesting. All right. Well, I want to give you the last word here, and just to speak about what you want now. When you were sitting at night at your boardroom or in your board school, and you had these dreams, and now you're implementing one of these dreams. What do you want now? What's next?
I think in Africa, let me not just use Africa, let me say in emerging economies around the world, there's a power need. And I think the first step to any type of growth for any country is solving that power problem. We're not naive to think that we're going to solve all of the problems, but we recognize that we can actually make an impact. Right now, the first step is solidifying our base and providing at least enough impact in the power space in Nigeria. Outside of Nigeria, there's a lot of other African countries that we're very interested in as well. There's Togo, there's Liberia, there's Gambia, there's Guinea. There's a lot of other African countries that also have the same power needs as Nigeria. Outside of Africa, there are other smaller islands that also have power needs as well that we've also been talking to also. Pivoting slightly away from power, the next step really for us is really agriculture. Is how do we support the agricultural space in Africa? There's a huge shortage, and that shortage is really, warehousing. When a farmer produces goods from the farm to market, in a lot of African countries, 60% of the produce is lost just because of bad roads, because of there's no good road network, because there isn't reliable power to store these produces. They only get about 40% to market. Now, the 40%, because there's not enough storage, in itself also goes bad. So maybe you really are only able to sell 30 or 20% of everything that you've actually farmed. And it's looking at how can we actually solve part of that problem. And I think we have a very unique solution to solving it. But so as not to come across as being all over the place, what we are trying to do first is to first of all raise enough money to actually put a dent into some of these power problems is the first step. As of right now, we're looking to raise a total of about $100 million to be able to solve that power problem. And then shouldn't take us too long to do that. A couple of years, be able to spend all the $100 million. But then look at agriculture. How do we actually add to the value chain of supporting farmers to be able to get their produce out to market faster and in a more cost-effective way?
That is a aspirational goal that, with what I've seen so far, you're going to be knocking on that door sooner than you think.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Wole, thanks for spending the time with us here today. And I continue to enjoy our chats, and I look forward to ongoing working with you. And we'll have you again here again soon, and we'll have an update where we stand a year from now.
Absolutely.
Yeah? That sounds great. Good stuff. Thanks, Wole.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to Energy and Africa. I'm your host, Chris McLean. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, stonechaircapital.com, to your friends and colleagues. And please, leave us a positive review on all your social platforms. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts and videos. Check us out on Twitter and LinkedIn. Details are all on the show notes. Join us next time for another edition of Energy and Africa.